in today's topic we are going to be looking at the Renaissance painter Giorgione. We are going to be looking at some of his more famous works, but before then, just to give a little bit of background and a little bit of context. So Giorgione was born in 1477 or 78, we are not entirely sure. He passed away in 1510. As a matter of fact, he passed away due to the plague that was raging across Europe at the time. So he died very young, but he still had a very progressive career. He worked amongst many artists. He worked with Titian, for example, who we're going to look at a little bit later on in comparison. There's a lot of mystery surrounding him as an artist. As a matter of fact, he left very few surviving works signed. And he was also one of the artists that kind of shifted away in this period of time and painted with much more of symbolism and illusion that we have seen before. So that kind of sums up a little bit what I've included here in the third point of this particular slide, that the uncertainty surrounding the identity and meaning of his work has made him one of the more mysterious figures in European art. So if we take a look at this painting by Titian, so just to give you a little bit of background on what the Venetian school was in comparison to the Florentine school that was the rivalry at the time. So together with Titian, who was probably slightly younger than he was, he founded a distinctive Venetian school of Italian Renaissance painting, which achieves much of its effect through color and mood, and is traditionally contrasted with Florentine painting, which relies on a more linear disegno-led style. So disegno, just to kind of give you a little bit of vocabulary, disegno also means drawing as well as design. And very often when we're looking at disegno, we are thinking about those Leonardo da Vinci drawings that we've had a look at, and I think most people are familiarized with. But just to give you now a little bit of a comparison, so here we have some of the great artists of the Florentine school. So we have Botticelli, we have Michelangelo and Raphael. And if you take a look then and go back to Titian, and you can see the moodiness of Titian's painting and this incredible sensation of being able to create mood through using this layering of colors and darkness and light, in contrast to perhaps the more strive to perfection on a different level with the Florentine school. So now then, let's go back a little bit. So they worked side by side, and they were actually apprenticeship in the same shop, the famous artist of Bellini. They collaborated on numerous paintings, and their styles could be so similar that it's difficult to conclusively assign authorship. That means, in other words, that there are many paintings that still today we cannot determine if they were painted by Giorgione or Titian. A speciality of Giorgione's were the idyllic Arcadian scenes with the examples of his three philosophers. Okay, so we have these two works here side by side. So let's look at them a little bit. And this element was adapted by his master Bellini, who increased the landscape in many Madonnas, and by Titian in work like Pastoral Concert, which we have here, the top one, and the Sacred and Profane Love. This emphasis on the nature as a setting was a major contribution of the Venetian school. And now this is really important to remember. Around this period of time, we're looking at 1508, 1515, so let's say around 1510, starting to include landscapes were really becoming something quite new. Perhaps for us now, it is a little bit difficult to imagine how including landscape in a painting could be revolutionary, but it was. So this is a portrait that is the only painting that we actually know was made by Giorgione. It was the only one that he actually signed. And the painting itself is very beautiful, but it is more interesting due to all its allegory. So it depicts a young woman as a bride, which perhaps seems a bit odd considering the fact that she has exposed her breast. But it is thought to be depicting of Laura di Noves, Like Giorgione's other work, it is unsigned. However, they have been able to trace a signature on the back. So if you look on the third point where I've included that an inscription on the reverse, accepted as an early 16th century, identifies Giorgione as the painter and provides the date, making this the only work by the artist bearing a reliable date. So let's go back then to this young woman. So if we take a look at behind her, there is this branch of laurus, which is a symbol of chastity. And what is chastity? If you do a little bit of a vocabulary lesson too, chastity means that she's pure, she's a virgin, she's ready for marriage in the purest way. She is carrying a veil, a nuptial veil, which would be this part. Usually we would see a veil covering all the way down, but this, due to its laciness, we think it's a nuptial veil. The gesture of opening the fur mantle, so this is supposed to be fur. Most likely the fur is also a representation of riches, and she's opening to show her bosom. This could be an indication of her maternity and maturity, and offering the love and a marriage blessed with children, considering the fact that the plants, this greenery that she has behind her, symbolizes virtue. So the visible breast could symbolize the bride's fidelity more than anything. Okay. The painting also has a very interesting story, because here we have a great example of, we have paintings within a painting within a painting. And so this is a painting that can be seen hanging on the wall of the Archduke's gallery in 1640. So very interestingly, you can actually see all the different artworks that the Archduke had collected over the years. So very interestingly, and this was the Archduke of Austria, who was an avid art collector. However, let's now move over to probably the most famous painting. So it's called the Tempest, and I have two slides to show you, one with the painting in full and one with some detail, and we're going to be looking at a few things that to be bearing in mind. This is a painting that has intrigued and inspired for centuries. Art historians and critics have published many books and articles and blogs, all containing their own interpretations. None of these very disparate views have gained prominence, and debates continue to rage. Even Vasari, the famous art historian, he wrote about this only 50 years after Giorgione's death, and he actually stated that he never fully understood the painting himself. It is thought that this was a painting that was commissioned by a Venetian nobleman. The assumption is largely as a result of Michael's little landscape description. However, as there is no proof, many has disputed this, pointing out that he could have purchased it. However, Giorgione had a formidable contemporary reputation as a painter to wealthy Venetian art collectors, so the assumption that a Venetian commissioner was involved in the painting is not unreasonable. So now let's take a little bit of a look at what's going on in the painting. So we have here a nude woman suckling a child while sitting on a small hill near a stream. She gazes into the distance. She seems unaware of her surrounding, even the child. Unusually, the child is next to her, which exposes her pubic area. For many, this excludes the possibility of being Madonna and a child. So usually the child would have been placed here in the front, but she is exposed completely, and so that's why we think that this is not a Madonna, this is a representation of something else. Now, on the other side here, we have this gentleman who is very fashionably dressed. He stands in a contrapposto, so if we take a look a little bit closer here. For those of you who don't remember, a contrapposto is a reference to the archaic sculptures. He's holding a staff. He appears to be in another world. He has stopped to watch the woman, smiling, but apparently not really acknowledged. For some, he is a soldier, and for some, saying that he's just a very fashionable Venetian man. This is what you wore in that period of time. And, in particular, the two-tone stockings were very fashionable in this time. So that you can see, for example, he has one red and one white. This was something that was considered to be out of fashion at the time. We also have the two pillars here, which are broken, and they are prominently positioned in the center of the painting, and therefore appears to be significant. These pillars are not related to any other building, which underscores their prominence. Pillars have many meanings, including death, for example, used widely in funeral statuary, especially Victorian. Steadfastness, fortitude, Hercules even. So this, we are not entirely sure why they are here. And also we have this background. In this background we have a town. Many have identified it as Padua, a ruin in a sense, a paradise, or just a typical northern Italian town. The town's identity and significance can be discussed to greater lengths, but for now we're just going to leave it up for interpretation. And here we have this beautiful example of how you can use oil to create this incredibly moody sky. There is also a small white bird. If we take a look here at the top of the roof of the building on the right hand side, is this bird significant? It's difficult to see with the naked eye, and it appears to be painted just a couple of brush strokes. This is the kind of quick layout of the painting. However, we don't have a direct explanation for it, which still leaves us with a lot of unanswered questions. But what is important here to take into account is that it's also the first time that nature is allowed to take up such a huge part of the painting. These two characters, which are incredibly mysterious to us, we do not know how they are related. We do not know exactly where the setting is. And we have this landscape who is allowed to take up much of the painting. The sky is beautifully moody, just like if you go back and look a little bit at the Titian paintings in comparison, we have this darkness seeping in. And to add to the mystery, by using more modern X-ray techniques, some art historians have actually managed to see that this male figure wasn't always there. So that opens up for